Night school.
Night school.
Bhagavad Gita. So excited to do this one.
I'm excited to hear about it.
So, it is a strikingly Christian book for a few reasons. There's a Hindu god called Vishnu, and Vishnu is like Hindu mythology is a little confusing to like a Western Christian mind like mine because they have like multiple gods that to me sound like, oh, that's God, because they'll be like, this God is the creator of everything, and then they'll be like, but this God is the sustainer of everything, but this God is what destroys and regenerates, and it's like in Christian thinking, we ascribe many different traits to the one God that is the God of gods, the God of everything. And in Hinduism, they tend to divide that out a little bit more. Like different gods are different aspects of the one God or different functions of the one God.
I suppose Christianity does break it up into three.
They do.
It is kind of confusing.
And it turns out that Hindus do too. So it's so confusing. So Krishna, who is the teacher in this book, actually, let me back up one more step. This book is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna is the teacher, Arjuna is the disciple, but
so the whole book is structured that way.
Yeah, the whole book is just direct dialogue, which I love. I love reading stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Gnostic Gospels that are just a recording between Jesus and a disciple asking him questions that any dumbass like us would ask a holy person like that if we could.
I didn't know that was the structure of those. I haven't read them.
Not all of them, but like the Book of Thomas that I really like is like that. It's just like, actually, I could easily be completely wrong about that, but it's definitely direct dialogue, but I don't know if it's question driven.
Okay.
But anyway, so Krishna is in Hindu thought a human incarnation of Vishnu. And Vishnu as a god is the sustainer of everything. Like he holds the universe together and protects it, but is thought of as the highest god. But then it depends on which Hindu worshiper you're talking about, right? Because they could have a different highest god.
They could have their own tier system.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. They could. But Vishnu is also said to be one of three in a trinity that makes up supreme divinity. And so that is just so Christian, it's insane.
Weird.
But the breakup is a little different. It's not like creator, first creation, and the act of creativity itself, where, because like Father, Holy Spirit, and Son is like that. It's like the projector, the projected image, and the projection itself. That's the Christian Trinity. It's broken up differently. But Vishnu is said to be one in a Trinity, and Krishna is said to be an incarnation of Vishnu. And some Hindus believe that later high saints were additional incarnations of Vishnu. Like Vishnu perpetually visits Earth, does what he has to do, takes off, comes back again. Some Hindus even believe that Vishnu is going to come back again near the end of the world. Like there's like a Christ is going to come back at the end of the world belief in Hinduism.
Right.
It just fucking blows me away. And some Hindus consider Jesus another incarnation of Vishnu, just like Krishna.
Yeah, it adds up.
Yeah, in that thinking system, like it makes perfect sense. And so some can consider like Muhammad and Buddha and other guys to be other incarnations of Vishnu too.
Totally.
So I learned on Google last night that Krishna is said to be an incarnation of Vishnu. But when I reread this book, because I read this like 6 weeks ago, maybe.
Okay. It
was around Christmas I was reading it, because I impulse bought this while Christmas shopping.
Nice.
You know how that goes. Yeah. Buy yourself a present while you're out.
Yeah.
I read it in like not 1 hour, probably 30-minute sections. I would like read a little bit and meditate and do the same thing the next day. And then today I reread the whole thing because it's little passages like this.
Nice.
So it's like a 2.5 hour read.
Actually, Sean was just telling me that he read it in a day one time as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't as pleasant reading it today because I was like, I'm gonna just knock this out and read the whole thing right before I record it. So I didn't get to like just sip every line. It was way more pleasant to read it in chunks before and after meditating. But anyway, as I reread it today, I noticed that it actually doesn't say that Krishna is the incarnation of Vishnu. It actually, Krishna is speaking on behalf of some deity that he's trying to explain to Arjuna. And he explains that among the sky gods, he is Vishnu. And it's in a series of comparisons that he's making between his own nature and nature that we can observe. So he's saying like, actually, let me just, oh yeah, here.
So Vishnu, just to make sure I got the names right, Vishnu is the one that is more the analog of God. Krishna is the more Jesus-y one, right? The one that is in the parallels we're drawing.
Yeah.
Krishna is Jesus?
Yeah, Krishna is Jesus. Vishnu, like the summary that I read online was like, oh, Krishna is supposedly the incarnation of Vishnu. But now I'm going to refute that point in a second, but I'm going to back up and offer a little bit of more general summary of what the context of this book.
Got it.
And then I'm going to go into, is he really Vishnu, or was it just a comparison?
Okay.
So Arjuna is a general of an army that in the story is the good guys, and the bad guys have waged an unjust war. But Arjuna is related to some of the people on the other side of the war. So as he, as a general, is about to lead his people out into combat and fight, he asks the guy who drives his chariot to bring him out to the center of the battlefield directly between the two armies. Okay. And he wants to look out at both from the center so that he can contemplate and think. So the chariot driver drives him out there. The chariot driver is Krishna. They stop in the middle, directly between the two sides, and time freezes. And this whole conversation occurs in that frozen moment. So you can totally see the parallels there where his encounter, I guess parallels to Buddhist thinking, where obviously because Buddhism like fed out of this is a Vedic Hindu text, and Buddhism fed out of the Vedic Hindu line of thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's...
Can you draw the line between Vedic and Hindu for me?
Not very fucking clearly.
Okay.
So the Vedic tradition is specifically referring to the tradition of the Vedas. Veda is a Sanskrit word that means truth. So Vedas refers to the truths, and it's a big collection of scriptures. Like there's, I think, a couple dozen texts that can be called Vedas. This is one of them. One of the Vedas is the Mahabharata, which is 8 times longer than the Odyssey and the Iliad combined. It's insane.
Jeez.
And this thing is a little episode plucked out of that monster, the Mahabharata.
Okay.
So, but supposedly it was written, like most scholars agree that it was written as a standalone text, and then it was added to the Mahabharata to put it into context, and there's some debate about whether that was a good idea, whether it was better in that context or just on its own. But it's one of the most popular texts. The Bhagavad Gita is one of the most popular texts that you can call a Veda.
Okay.
So
the Vedas are ancient Sanskrit text that is spiritual in nature, and Hinduism takes a lot of influence from that, is based primarily on the Vedas, right?
I don't know that Hinduism is based primarily on the Vedas. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Hinduism was a cultural movement that picked up at a specific time for a specific reason that I don't understand, and it meant something like the people who live by the river. It was just like Hindus meant like, oh, the guys who live by the river.
Got it.
And Hinduism as a culture blossomed out of some historical moment that I don't understand. But I'm attending a Vedic university, Maharishi International University, and I was saying in essays that Maharishi, the founder of the school, was a Hindu religious teacher, because he is explicitly a religious teacher, but the school insists that he's not religious. Like, oh, there's nothing religious about this. We just want you to meditate and experience pure consciousness. Like, that's really fucking religious. I'm down to meditate and experience pure consciousness, but this is fucking religious. Right. And they go, no, because we're not Hindus. We are people who follow the teachings of Maharishi. The teachings of Maharishi are Vedic teachings. While the Vedas contain religious philosophy, like this book, but they also contain, like, astronomy. They contain philosophy that's not inherently religious. They contain health information. Like,
okay, so it's just ancient knowledge, some of which we may have forgotten.
Yes.
I guess in popular culture, at least. Yeah.
So, Ayurveda is a health system that's holistic and naturopathic that's gaining a little bit of traction around the world right now. And Ayurveda, it means something like knowledge of the span of life. And so Ayurveda is basically the medical system according to the Vedas. That's what Ayurveda is, as a body,
Okay.
as a body of knowledge, as a health system. So it's like you can get, and then there's also Vedic astrology. So
Right.
Vedic astrology, I think, is more legit than Western astrology, because there's something about like I don't know how to describe this articulately, but the Western astrological system gets off every so amount of time
Right.
because the cycles don't quite match up.
Yeah, the cycles aren't perfect, and there's tilts to the circles aren't all like perfectly lined up. There's tilts to them that ends up throwing things off, so it changes.
Yeah, so you'll hear like, oh, you're actually one sign off from what you think, because and Vedic astrology has understood that for thousands of years and accounted for it.
Right.
And so I'm an Aquarius in the Western system and a Capricorn in the Vedic system, and I think the Vedic system is better. So they
I
have.
remember when you pointed this out to me like 6 months ago. I looked.
Yeah,
it
and we
up,
all looked up our Vedic ones.
and Scorpio did feel more appropriate when I read it off. It did feel like more true than Sagittarius did.
Nice.
Yeah.
And a couple people said that in the group chat.
Yeah.
So that's solid data. We've established.
Yeah. So Vedas are canon. So this is a fact.
Right.
Okay.
So so the line between the Vedic and Hindu, the line between what's Vedic and what's Hindu is blurry to me. Like, but what I do understand is that you could say that there is a train of thought from the Vedic knowledge to Hinduism to Buddhism, because the Vedas are all holy to the Hindus, but they have like the Vedas, and they have a couple other kind of bodies of knowledge too that they draw from.
Okay.
And it's a specific cultural expression of those truths. And then Gautama Buddha was born a Hindu, but taught in such a pure and unique way that it blossomed into a new movement. Just like Jesus was the king of the Jews, but it's like, oh, this guy's so different. This is a new thing.
Right.
We call this Christianity. This is a different thing now. So, so why did I mention the Vedic Hindu Buddhist train of thought?
You were going to. Yeah, I derailed you, asking about just clarifying.
Yeah, but it was very important to clarify, because I'm just bouncing around saying random shit that we've talked about before.
Yeah, you referred to it as Buddhist, and then you just said because this is Buddhist. It's kind of, yeah.
I was just trying to draw a parallel.
Okay.
To the yin and yang philosophy. That's where we got off. It's just trying to say yin and yang. Most people associate the yin and yang concept with Buddhism, but it's a Vedic and Hindu idea too, that all of the kinds of experiences that we have as relative, limited, finite beings are dualistic, in the sense that the way we experience reality is that objects are separate from one another, and in the way that God experiences reality, everything is unified, one, eternally. Mm-hmm. And to us, it looks like things are here today and gone tomorrow. And that reality doesn't look like that to God. There's not really a finite timeline. There's not really separate objects. There's not really separate organisms. Everything's one eternal superorganism from the God perspective. So that's the unified perspective. And the human perspective is a dualistic one, because everything seems all broken up. Mm-hmm. So this idea that the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna occurs in the center of the battlefield between two armies in a frozen moment alludes to that. Mm-hmm. So that's where this whole conversation occurs. And in the beginning, the premise of the conversation is that Arjuna is saying, I can't go out and kill these people. This is ridiculous. Some of these people are related to me. Like, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. And Krishna's like, okay, first of all, you have to understand that death is not even real. And all of those people are relative expressions of a shared soul. And ultimately, from the absolute perspective, killing these people is, dying and then going to another life is like taking off clothes and putting on new clothes. Like, Krishna is basically saying, oh, they'll be fine, trust me. You don't even understand how reality works.
Interesting.
Very, very dangerous idea.
Sure.
There's actually, I listened to a podcast about the Bhagavad Gita today called like the Yoga History Podcast or something. And Evan, our local Nazi historian, who was Heinrich Himmler, is that a correct name?
Yeah,
of a Nazi leader. So Heinrich Himmler used to go to death camps and tell the death camp henchmen, or whatever the fuck they were called, like, remember in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna tells Arjuna, you're a warrior, go to war. That's your job. God's not going to hold that against you. You're a warrior, go to... Well, you guys are death camp henchmen, so go out there and death camp these people.
This is fine.
And
that's not even real.
Oh, Evan has a picture. Is that your wallpaper? So obviously it's a dangerous idea, but obviously there's something
really interesting that it got weaponized that way.
Yeah.
Weaponized to like just kill him.
And
just fucking kill him. Don't be a pussy.
I don't think
It
there's
doesn't even
religious
matter.
texts that aren't weaponized. You know, it's like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
they contain really, really poignant ideas, then those ideas can be used differently.
Yeah.
You know, you can do whatever you want with them. They're power. They have power in them.
Yeah.
And the gods gamble on us by giving them to us. You know, and so they're going to be used for bad and good purposes.
Yeah.
Except the Bible.
It's
and-
been pure. I love that.
And so this conversation is occurring, and Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that all of these people are just going to go somewhere. You know, like he thinks that this death is this absolute thing. And Krishna starts explaining what life really is, that life is really just this absolute unified structure folding in on itself in all of these different ways all the time. And it made me think about how people are obviously appalled by genocide, even like a biblical genocide where God would be like, oh, these people are sinful, you need to go wipe them off of the face of the earth because they're nothing but trouble. Trust me, just do it. Just fucking listen, just do it. And the people would be like, no, we can't do it. And they'd leave a few alive. And then God would be like, okay, now you just cursed yourself forever. They're going to pop back up and ruin the world. If you compare those types of conversations that happen in the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita to a situation like cells fighting each other inside of the body of a person who has cancer, you can see the point. Like, if you told a cancer patient that they should do their best to stop willing their, what would it be, white blood cells to attack red blood cells or whatever. No, that's just general sickness. I'm not a fucking doctor. Okay, good cells to kill cancer cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do good cells kill cancer cells? Or do cancer cells just die?
I think your cells turn against your other cells.
Yeah, they do. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So, I mean, from God's perspective, it is possible that humans turning on other humans looks like cells turning on other cells. And we find it perfectly palatable that cells turn on other cells. That's the only point I'm trying to make. So my complete ignorance about the scientific details of that
is interesting.
doesn't
I've
matter.
never thought about that.
And so it's appalling to us that people would kill people because people are so complex to us and cells are so simple. But if you ask a theoretical physicist what exactly is more complex about a human than a cell, he might tell you a human just looks more complex to you because your relative perception recognizes so many elements in a human and so few elements in a cell. If you could really see the complexity that's contained in a cell and compare that to the complexity contained in a human, both of those levels of complexity are so incomprehensible that they're both just, really, really complex. And,
Sure.
and there are little universes being destroyed when cells turn on each other. But we understand that some cells have to turn on other cells. And so, according to several great religious texts, killing a bunch of people is sometimes justified and okay in the eyes of God. And so that's just something that we got to sit with and chew on as humans. But I mean, it's not just that humans are not that much more complicated than cells when you really get down to it. Because that's a point. But the real point is that from the absolute perspective, it's not appropriate to compare a cell to a human and say a human is worth more because it's more complex, because that's dualistic thinking. Like, from our relative dualistic perspective, a human being is way more important than a cell. But if it is the case that everything is just expressions or fluctuations in the unified field or God or whatever you want to call the place of unity in being, then a cell and a human are both just relative. They're both just finite. Like if you go, just to give an example, 1 mile per hour under the speed of light, and you race the speed of light right next to it, it's still going to speed away from you at 500 million miles per hour. It's not like you're going to almost catch up to the speed of light. It goes at a speed that you can't compare any speeds to. It speeds away from you at the same speed no matter what speed you go next to it. And so, in that same sense, how many years are you away from being infinity years old? And how many years am I away from being infinity years old? But you're older than me. But from the infinite perspective, we're both just finite years old.
Sure.
And so from the infinite perspective, a cell and a human are both of finite complexity. And those are equal in the eyes of the infinite. That's the point I'm trying to make about comparing the human and the cell.
Yeah.
And so Krishna's chewing on this ethical conundrum with Krishna, and then he just goes into asking Krishna questions. And it starts to come out and become evident in the book that Krishna is the incarnation of the God of gods. And I think it's a misinterpretation to compare Krishna to an incarnation of Vishnu. And so here's where I'm going to get back to that point.
Okay.
So this is such an incredible passage where Arjuna asks Krishna to give examples of how to think about the God that Krishna is speaking on behalf of. Like, how could you give me something to ground myself in that I can use to understand your nature? Mm-hmm. So here's how Arjuna asks.
Okay.
You, Lord, are the supreme freedom, the supreme abode, the eternal person, the primordial God, all-pervading, birthless. This is how the great sages describe you, the divine Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa. I don't know what any of those words mean, unfortunately. And now you yourself confirm it. Everything you have told me, Krishna, I believe is true. Neither the gods nor the demons can grasp your infinite forms. You alone know yourself through yourself, Lord of all beings, cause and origin, master of the universe, God of gods. Tell me now in detail the divine self-manifestations by which you pervade these worlds and grace them with so much splendor. How can I know you, Krishna? Which of your many forms should I visualize, Lord of Yoga, as I focus my thoughts on you? Give me some further examples of your glorious manifestations, for I never can tire of hearing your life-giving, honey-sweet words. So here's his answer. All right, Arjuna, I will tell you a few of my manifestations, the most glorious ones, for infinite are the forms in which I appear. I am the self, Arjuna, seated in the heart of all beings. I am the beginning and the lifespan of beings, and their end as well. Of the sky gods, I am Vishnu. Of the heavenly lights, the sun. Marichi, chief of the wind gods. Among stars, I am the moon. Now I'm going to pause there, and this beautiful poem will continue, but to pause there, he's just saying, in any given system you can observe, I am the greatest in that system, and simultaneously everything in that system. And he's giving all these individual examples, and he says, of the sky gods, I am Vishnu. So I think it's incorrect that he's an incarnation of Vishnu. I feel like that's a misunderstanding of what Krishna was, because he's just saying, in terms of sky gods, I'm Vishnu.
Yeah. He's saying of the sky gods, I am the Vishnu of that group. I'm the god of that group.
Right. So he is saying, I am Vishnu, but he's also saying I am everything. He's not saying, hey, my name is Vishnu, but my relative human name is Krishna, and I'm here to talk to you. He's saying, like, in terms of sky gods, I'm Vishnu. In terms of seasonings, I'm salt. In terms of color, I am light itself. He's just giving these examples, you know? So, but I still brought up Vishnu and him potentially being an incarnation because I'm reading this through a Christian lens, and I'm interested that he is clearly a Christ figure, and that's really interesting, and the God he is supposedly an incarnation of is one in a Trinity, and I'm just, interested in both of those comparisons.
Yeah, very interesting.
Even though one of them I feel is a little misleading. So, but anyway, here's the rest of that little poem. Mm-hmm. Of the Vedas, I am the hymns. Indra among the gods. The mind among the six senses. The consciousness of all beings. Of the storm gods, I am Shiva. of the demigods Kubera, Agni among the bright gods, and Miro, highest of mountains. Know, Arjuna, that among priests I am Brihaspati, of generals the war god Skanda, of waters I am the ocean, of the great seers I am Brigu, of words the syllable Om, of worship I am the mantra, of mountain chains Himalaya, of trees the sacred fig tree, of divine sages Narada, of the high celestial mountains Chitraratha, of saints the wise Kapila, of horses, some long-ass name. So there's a lot of, actually, most of the rest of them are those specific references to other Vedic figures, so they don't land with us.
But it kind of sounds like he's just saying, like, I am the best, like, of every group, I'm the best thing in that group.
He's saying of every hierarchy, I am the peak.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's the same thing that you're saying, but yeah, that's what he's saying. I'm the top of every pyramid.
So maybe he's just he's pointing out that, like, I am the best expression of a horse, and I am the best expression of a this.
Yeah.
I am the best expression of a mountain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think his point is, because Arjuna is asking, what should I visualize in order to focus my thoughts on you? So he's saying, here's 30 examples. So then extract from those 30 examples the meta expression of what I really am, and use that to visualize me. And whatever that is, that meta expression, I mean, I think we can both, just off hearing those examples, even though most of them aren't culturally relevant to us, can then easily grasp that in our heads and could close our eyes for the next 10 minutes and just fix ourselves on that concept. Even though the concept itself can't really be spoken. You just have to speak a bunch of examples and descriptions of it.
Yeah, just trying to think of the best thing, like of the best thing that could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the best of each thing in existence, each thing in its perfect form. And so he's saying that's what he is. So he is clearly saying that he is the God of gods. He's speaking on behalf of the God of gods, the ultimate God, the source, all of that. And so I suppose from a certain level of analysis, he is the incarnation of Vishnu. But he is also the incarnation of all those other things that he mentioned. The greatest saint, the greatest sage, the greatest seer, the greatest priest, the greatest warrior.
And Krishna, in this story of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is incarnate. He's a man.
Yeah, he is a human being that was born in 3228 BC.
Oh, okay.
This is a dude.
All right.
And but supposedly this book about this conversation wasn't written until like 2,500 years after that. So I don't know how that works, but supposedly they in this unbroken chain of Vedic knowledge, they kept those records just like the Jews did. Mm-hmm. They're like, no, this shit is important. We're keeping one consistent lineage of knowledge. We're writing everything down. We're writing it down a few times. We're storing this. The Vedic tradition was like that. Mm-hmm. Is like that. The Vedic tradition is currently the longest unbroken chain of knowledge in recorded history. Wow. They've got the record right now. They've been collecting knowledge for thousands of years, and it's been an oral tradition for most of its history, because writing has only existed as long as writing has existed, mm-hmm. and has been written as long as it could be, but it's fundamentally an oral tradition because it goes back so long. And so all of these Vedic texts that you're going to read, they're all like poems and songs because that's how you can memorize something. So, I mean, like if you read this in Sanskrit, every single line would be like a certain amount of syllables. Like it's like 8 syllables per line, and there's a certain alteration. Like when you read Sanskrit, some vowels have a line over them and you pronounce them twice as long. And so there was a specific amount of like single paced syllables and double paced syllables in each line. It's all very, very structured and synchronistic so that they can remember it, because they were memorizing books and books and books and books and books of content and passing it on as an oral tradition. So
interesting.
This is just a clunky English translation. Bhagavad Gita actually means like song of God, or like the song of the Blessed One, or something like that, depending on the translator.
He had said, of the Vedas, I am the hymn. Is like
And
elevating the
hymns.
songs that are in the Vedas
For
higher
sure.
than all the rest of it. Which is
Yeah.
interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there seems to be a detachment from that in the Christian religious tradition. Like nobody wants to sing the hymns from Psalms. Like they're not
They're lame.
they're not good.
There's no
And
guitar
so
riffs.
and so we write songs that are just like about ourself, but kind of like our own relationship with God, but like mostly ourself. So, you know, traditions get broken and shit. But let's see. I have a bunch of freaking corners of pages folded. I'm going to just flip through and see what feels interesting to tell you about. Because now we've gotten through the context of the book, and now we can just start fucking around with tidbits of the book.
Love it.
Because there's just all sorts of interesting things here. Oh, I'll try to find you the cosmic vision, because that was filthy. Chapter 11 is the cosmic vision, where Arjuna asks to see God, and Krishna is like, oh yeah, here it is. If you think I am strong enough, worthy enough to endure it, grant me now, Lord, a vision of your vast, imperishable self. This is so cool to read. Wait. Oh yeah, it is. This is so cool to read before meditation. Like, this is so fucking cool.
Okay.
Look, Arjuna, thousands, millions of my divine forms, beings of all kinds and sizes, of every color and shape. Look, the sun gods, the gods of fire, dawn, sky, wind, storm, wonders that no mortal has ever beheld. Look, Arjuna. The whole universe, all things animate or inanimate, are gathered here. Look, enfolded inside my infinite body. But since you are not able to see me with mortal eyes, I will grant you divine sight. Look, the depths of my power. And now it switches to italics. After he had spoken these words, Krishna, the great lord of yoga, revealed to Arjuna his majestic, transcendent, limitless form. With innumerable mouths and eyes, faces too marvelous to stare at, dazzling ornaments, innumerable weapons uplifted, flaming, crowned with fire, wrapped in pure light, with celestial fragrance, he stood forth as the infinite God, composed of all wonders. If 1,000 suns were to rise and stand in the noon sky, blazing, such brilliance would be like the fierce brilliance of that mighty self. Arjuna saw the whole universe enfolded, with its countless billions of life forms gathered together in the body of the God of gods. Trembling with awe, his blood chilled, the hair standing up on his flesh, he bowed, and, joining his palms, spoke these words to the Lord. I see all gods in your body, and multitudes of beings, Lord, and Brahma on his lotus throne, and the seers, and the shining angels. I see you everywhere, with billions of arms, eyes, bellies, faces, without end, middle, or beginning, your body the whole universe, Lord. Crowned, bearing mace and discus, you dazzle my vision, blazing in the measureless, massive, sun-flame splendor of your radiant form. You are the deathless, the utmost goal of all knowledge, the world's base, the guardian of the eternal law, the primordial person. I see you beginningless, endless, infinite in power, with 1,000,000,000 arms, the sun and moon your eyeballs, the flames of your mouth lighting the whole universe with splendor. You alone fill all space, and the 3 worlds shudder when they see your astounding, terrifying form. Multitudes of gods approach you, palms joined in dread and wonder. Multitudes of sages chant to you hymns of deep adoration. The storm gods, the gods of light, of sky, dawn, and wind, the angels, the saints, the demigods, the demons, all gaze at you in amazement. Your stupendous form, your billions of eyes, limbs, bellies, mouths, dreadful fangs, seeing them the worlds tremble, and so do I. As you touch the sky, many-hued, gape-mouthed, your huge eyes blazing, my innards tremble, my breath stops, my bones turn to jelly. Seeing your billion-fanged mouths blaze like the fires of doomsday, I faint, I stagger, I despair. Have mercy on me, Lord Vishnu. All Dhritarashtra's men, and all these multitudes of kings, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, with all our warriors behind them, are rushing headlong into your hideous, gaping, knife-fanged jaws. I see them with skulls crushed, their raw flesh stuck to your teeth. As the rivers and many torrents rush toward the ocean, all these warriors are pouring down into your blazing mouths. As moths rush into a flame and are burned in an instant, all beings plunge down your gullet and instantly are consumed. You gulp down all worlds, everywhere swallowing them in your flames, and your rays, Lord Vishnu, fill all the universe with dreadful brilliance. Who are you in this terrifying form? Have mercy, Lord. Grant me even a glimmer of understanding to prop up my staggering mind. The blessed Lord said, I am death, shatterer of worlds, annihilating all things. With or without you, these warriors and their facing armies will die. Therefore, stand up, win glory, conquer the enemy, rule. Already I have struck them down. You are just my instrument, Arjuna. It's pretty heavy.
That's really cool.
It reminds me of that line, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Because to really experience God is to come face to face with the fact that God will one day destroy everything you love. And he will do it mercilessly. You know, like in another part in this book, it explains that God creates an entire universe of universes. And then it goes out and it expands and complicates. And then he swallows up the whole thing. And everything goes completely dark.
Which all that swallowing stuff sounds like black hole. Like I was just thinking of black holes while you were reading it. Like it sounds like he's describing, and because I've thought about black holes a lot and about how like it seems plausible that eventually those are just going to suck up everything. Eventually we'll just get sucked up into a black hole, and that reminded me of like that idea.
Yeah, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. To really find God, you have to like swallow that. You know, you have to be like, I'm going to die and everything I care about is going to be gone. And it's going to be gone for good. Like for good. Because then the universe will return to its state of nothingness and there will be nothing but God. And then God will create new stuff again. And so the only freedom from that is to be God, you know, to submit to such a total death that there's nothing left. There's nothing left in the universe. You and all your jobs and tasks and friends and families and responsibilities and values and everything is going to die, and it's never, ever going to return again. And the only eternal life is that pure consciousness that rests for that moment. Like everything is going to go black. And then it's going to be born again. It's going to happen again. And this book actually says how long those eras are. It says it's 1.5 trillion years. Every 1.5 trillion years, everything shuts off. The whole fucking power goes out. There's nothing. And then it starts over again. And the only way to get knowledge like that would be directly from, you know, whatever turns off that light.
Now, I don't know why we should at all trust this information, but what I've heard is that the universe is 4 billion years old, is what scientists have calculated. Which would be...
4 billion?
The Earth is 4 billion?
The Earth is 4 billion.
Oh.
The universe is like...
13.
13.6 or something. Yeah.
Which would be way off, although that's not... I don't know.
And that. I have learned at MIU in physics that according to the Vedic texts, what present-day scientists call the universe is one universe within universes that the Vedic tradition has known about for thousands of years. Like the Vedic guys are just sitting there like, okay, now they're up to like 13 billion. It's like, we've been telling you guys how old this whole thing is for thousands of years. Like, we know how old it is. You couldn't have... If we had told you guys 100 or 200 years ago that it was 1 trillion years old, you would have said, well, fuck you, it's thousands of years old. And now you're saying, fuck you, it's billions of years old.
Yeah.
And the Vedic guys are just sitting there like, okay. Like,
so are you saying that they think our 13 billion figure is not wrong, but it's just like we're looking at a much smaller cycle, like we're looking at the second hand turning around and we should be looking at the hour turning around?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a good example. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that example. Yeah, it's like that. They're saying like, yeah, the amount of the universe that you have been able to calculate and explore is that old. But there's the difference between these seers of the Vedic tradition and the modern scientists is it's the difference between. Actually, no. I was gonna bring up the saying, like, if you want to go far, go together.
Mhm.
Oh no, it does match that. If you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone.
Yeah.
The seers are like people who independently, by exploring their own inner nature, went all the way to the edges of the universe. And the modern science project, this project that we've all taken on together as a modern science, society, is like we're not going to just plunge into our own inner being and go all the way to the end of the game. We're all going to work through this game together. We're going to take one piece of knowledge at a time, and we're going to create one big body of knowledge until we figure everything out together.
Step by step, agree. Yep, that was a good step.
Yep.
Yep. Now let's do the next one.
Okay. Wait.
Yeah.
We have to undo this couple steps. Okay. Oh, that study turned out to be corrupt. Well, undo that one. But we're going to do this whole thing together. And so I genuinely think that it is possible and scientifically rational that there are seers who can go further than modern science has gone. They can do that independently.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a big difference between an individual having a certain kind of knowledge and a group of billions of people having thoroughly, objectively, carefully established a certain kind of knowledge.
Right. They can show their work.
Exactly.
Whereas the seer can't. You have to
Exactly.
trust.
Right. And they can demonstrate their work by doing things we thought were impossible. So that's one of the ways that Krishna and Jesus figures establish that they know something. Like, hey, I know something you don't. It's like, prove it. It's like, here, I just did something that's physically impossible according to your worldview. So you get it. I know something you don't. And then people around them will go, oh, okay, yeah, you actually know something I don't. I think that that's possible and scientifically rational because in the same sense that the unified field manifests as every quantum field, every force, every particle of matter in all of being, but in the state, like if I were to tell you, picture the unified field, you would have to picture everything in existence simultaneously in order to picture the unified field, which you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
We know that everything comes from that, and everything is an expression of that. In that same sense, everybody's inner nature is connected to the very source of being. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
like I think we did the physics and consciousness episode, and I think I'm going to redo it, so that'll be out later. But I took a class at MIU that's Foundations of Physics and Consciousness, and they're making the argument that pure consciousness, according to the Vedic tradition, and the unified field, according to modern theoretical physicists, is the same phenomenon. The unified field is pure consciousness. That's the point that they're arguing at MIU. And the guy who's leading that effort at MIU is John Hagelin, who is a theoretical physicist from Harvard who did his PhD there on the unified field, and then also worked at, I think it's called CERN, which is like the biggest particle collider on the planet.
Okay.
That you can, I mean, it's so big that he was the American representative there. He was like the one American who was there for that year. And it's people from all these different countries collaborating on this big project.
Wow.
And so this isn't like some quack from MIU. And there's some quacks at MIU. But this isn't one of them. This guy, he makes his argument, like, here's one of the ways that he makes his argument. Whatever structure makes up your mind, we don't, as modern scientists, as a modern scientific community, we don't understand what the mind is made of, what substrate the mind is constituted of. But we know that it's made of the unified field, fundamentally, because we know that everything in existence is made of the same unified field.
Mm-hmm.
And superstring theory explains how that's possible, and M theory explains how that's possible. And so if your mind is made of the unified field, then your mind has access to the unified field. And if to say that pure consciousness isn't the unified field, it just breaks down when you try to explain it, because it's like, we know that everything in this room is made of the unified field. We know that everything in our bodies is made of the unified field. Mm-hmm. Whatever our minds are made of, we have to assume is made of the unified field. So
is Is there already a precedent for the idea that things that aren't physical are also made of the unified field?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because the four like fundamental forces of nature are obviously not according to the Vedic text, but electromagnetism, the radioactive force, the nuclear force, and gravity. Those are like the four fundamental forces of, I can't remember what level of analysis that is. Like that's the classical level of analysis, I think, of physics.
Okay.
You have those forces, and then you have four particle types, which is like up quark, down quark, lepton, and electron, I think. So you have like these four fundamental particles and these four fundamental forces, and then you have quantum fields that can simultaneously act as forces and particles of matter. And then you have the unified field, which can simultaneously act as multiple quantum fields. So it's not just, the unified field isn't just so deep that it can be matter and forces. It's so deep that it can be this quantum field that manifests as this matter and this force, and this quantum field that manifests as this matter and this force.
Okay.
So yes, and
Cool.
Theoretical physicists don't really believe in distinguishing between the physical and the non-physical in the way that like the average monkey brain like us does, where we're like, the mind isn't physical and this is. Like, they don't see things that way because what we perceive as physical is very tricky and illusory when you get down to it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's well established that whatever our minds are made of is made of the unified field. And so the origin of our minds is the unified field, and the origin of all physical matter is the unified field. And so that's why I say, that's why I make the ridiculous claim that it's scientifically rational that there are people who can use inner exploration to get down to secrets of nature. But you
Yeah.
can only do that by yourself. It's like you can go so far in that you get to the eternal, and you can go so far out that you can get to the eternal. And right now, modern society is working on going so far out together as a group that they get to the eternal. They're all going for something, some ultimate goal. But these guys have been just going in and getting it for thousands of years, and they're like waiting for everybody to catch up. And so,
In a way, that is like scientific, in that if you do double-blind things, like two people separate from each other separately seek and find the same thing and come back together and say, we saw it and I agree about this Vedic knowledge. Like, that is pretty scientific.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's ever been done. I don't know if there's been studies that systematically demonstrated corroboration in seers that had no contact. Like, I don't know of a study that's done that. I'm sure it exists. I'm sure that people have gone and looked and said, look, these seers from this place said this, and these seers from this place said this. So what is this, a coincidence that they both said this same thing? But if you try to convince a skeptic using something like that, you just get into the weeds, because they would go, oh, no, that's different. You'd go, no, they're saying the same thing. It's two different languages. And you'd get lost in the weeds doing it.
Yeah, that's really probably only good enough for the two people that were double-blinded. It's probably really only good enough for them.
And us.
Which is good enough for them. Yeah, and us.
Yeah, it works for us. One example of that that's really interesting is I'm taking a yoga class at MIU right now, and I learned a breathing technique called Pranayama. And dude, one thing, I'm just going to roast MIU for a second. In the beginning, they go, all you need to find enlightenment is transcendental meditation twice per day. And now they're going, it's an absolute necessity to do pranayama before transcendental meditation and do the yoga asanas. They call them the Maharishi yoga asanas. That's what they call like the yoga poses that they prescribe. The Maharishi yoga asanas. It's like, why do we need to put this guy's name on this? They're yoga poses.
Yeah.
But now they're going, oh, you got to do all these yoga too. Like, this is a necessity, and this breathing technique is a necessity, and TM is a necessity, and following the Ayurvedic health restrictions is a necessity. It's like, guys, slow the fuck down. I'm not even going to do TM anymore. You guys are freaking me out. So, but I do because it works. But anyway, so pranayama is a breathing technique where you alternate between closing one nostril. And so I close the left, exhale, inhale, close the right, exhale, inhale. If you read back to Edgar Casey's readings where he is asked, how do we meditate? He says the same thing. He says, first, before you meditate, and this is in a trance, This is, for people who don't know, Edgar Cayce is a fundamentalist Christian American from like the 20s to 50s or something like that would go into trances that were basically self-induced hypnotic states and would read off a bunch of information that he was getting from the universe, and it would be all this new age shit that he didn't even agree with. He would like come to and he'd be like, I was talking about reincarnation and the Akashic records. What the hell?
He didn't even remember talking about the things he said.
No,
People could ask
have
him
amnesia.
questions and he could respond. And
Yeah,
not
there's
remember.
14,000 documented psychic readings at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, and it's very, very well documented that Edgar Cayce was a psychic person. But anyway, why did Edgar Cayce dive into the Akashic records and find? And Akashic records is also a Vedic thing, by the way. That's from the Vedas. Akashic is a Sanskrit word.
And Akashic Records just refers to
Yeah,
a
thank
place that's not physical, it's not somewhere we can get to physically, but it's some sort of location where all the knowledge is stored,
Yeah.
and people can access it with their mind in
Right.
certain states.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So that's really interesting. Edgar Cayce and Maharishi, two completely different teachers from completely different cultures, for some reason have this teaching that before you meditate, you should plug one nostril at a time and breathe through them a few times and then meditate. It's like, what the fuck? They wouldn't just randomly both come up with that. It's as weird as saying plug your ears before you meditate, or, it's just totally bizarre.
Was
But
Edgar Cayce a meditator?
no, he just read the Bible and fucking smoked cigarettes, and then he would go in a trance and say,
Here's how
Weird
you should
shit.
meditate if you want to.
no, like he explained that meditation was essential. Like that it was that, like, he explained that prayer was communication from man to God, and meditation was opening up man's mind for communication to happen from God to man. So he explained prayer and meditation like the exhale and inhale of communication with God, and he said it was essential. But
Wow.
while he was in a trance,
Huh.
he would say all sorts of things. He would prescribe people certain crystals. He would talk about how reincarnation works. He'd talk about how to access the Akashic records, how to heighten your ESP, all sorts of things. And then he'd wake up and be like, I said, what? That's weird. It's kind of uncomfortable, but super weird. He read the Bible cover to cover every year for 40 years. He was a devout conservative Baptist. Then he would go into these trances. It's hilarious. But yeah, we're pretty off track, but I'm having fun.
Yeah, he's very interesting.
Yeah. I'm just going to find something else random. Oh, you asked me one time what my opinion was on, like, if you find enlightenment, can you lose it? And there's a similar question asked in this, so I'm going to throw that at you. Krishna, what happens to the man who, with faith but no self-control, wanders from the path of yoga before he becomes mature? And actually, let me explain real quick what yoga is according to this book.
Okay.
So yoga is a Sanskrit word that means unity. And so a yoga is a method of achieving unity. And
Meaning unity with the universe or with God.
Not unity with anything.
Okay.
Unity as such. That is unity with God, but it's not. I mean, it's a Western projection to call it unity with God, because unity with God implies separation from God, and that's not unity with God.
Okay.
Unity as such is godhood. You know
I see
what I
what you're
mean?
saying. Yeah.
But basically, like, Krishna explains to Arjuna, there's yoga of action, there's yoga of knowledge, there's yoga of meditation. These are different methods of achieving unity. And so yoga of action, for example, is do what you are called to do in the world. Do your duty in the world unapologetically. Do not expect any consequences for negative outcomes, and do not expect any rewards from positive outcomes. Just do your best to do your duty in the world one step at a time. And as long as you're being yourself and you're doing what you were programmed to do, you're absolutely covered by God. So, like, that makes me think of Tim Dillon, because Tim Dillon is a homosexual nihilist. And every single time I hear him speak, I'm like, this is God ordained. Like, this guy, guy is so fucking himself that I feel like God is watching down. He's like, that is exactly what I had in mind. I wanted to make this crazy motherfucker who could, like, he he's gay, so he can get away with saying certain cultural things that he would get like slammed for if he was straight.
Sure.
And if he wasn't fat, it wouldn't work. You know, if he was like
Yeah.
handsome and healthy, it wouldn't work. If he didn't have like all the drug problems as a child, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And now he's this unique person who can talk to nihilistic YouTubers and then talk to Christian scholars like Peterson.
Yeah, he's gonna go do Tucker Carlson's show next.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Fuck it,
Whatever.
man. Whatever. He just did. What did he just do?
He
That
did
chick.
Alec Baldwin and he did Tana Mojo.
I mean, if you're going on Tana Mojo talking to Jordan Peterson, talking to Lex Fridman, talking to Tucker Carlson,
Tana Mojo and Baldwin were like back-to-back days. Like,
right?
Yeah.
Dude. I mean, that's insane. In 1 month, he did Rogan, Fridman, Mojo, Baldwin. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he's all over the place, but it works in every situation because he's always himself.
Yeah.
He is unapologetic, and he's also the type to do nice things and not like expect anything for it. He's like, he just acts one step at a time. He just goes and goes and goes and does and does and does. And he had that epiphany, right, when he was like in his, what would it be, 20s, where he decided, you know what, I'm gay, I'm a stand-up comedian, and I'm sober. He just had
those
this like
things did
light
all
bulb.
happen at like 25, all at the same time.
Right. So he hit
Yeah.
his moment where he went, you know what? Instead of being all disordered and confused and am I gay? Am I not? Are drugs hurting me? Are drugs helping me? Am I funny? Am I not? Am I trying to make money? Am I trying to be rich? He all of a sudden it all clicked. And he just started shining Tim Dillon color. And he's generous and he's humble, but he's a vain douchebag who loves money. You know, he's just such
Yeah.
a strange combination.
Yeah,
But the impact he's having on the world is overwhelmingly positive
I agree.
because he's helping people cope with an unbelievable amount of change by seeing humor in it and
Yeah.
being
Yeah, yeah.
unapologetically them. And he's not bowing to like with the gay issue. He's not bowing to traditionalist or postmodern ideology on the subject.
Right.
He's just like, I'm just gay.
As a gay man, there's a way he's supposed to talk about gay issues.
Right.
And he's not interested in how you're supposed to talk about anything.
Because he's just gay. He's not doing a bit. He
Yeah.
just happens to be gay.
Yeah.
And so that's what it reminds me of is Tim Dillon because like, I mean, I personally, like, even before reading this book and making that connection, every time I looked at Tim Dillon, I'm like, I don't give a fuck what rules he breaks from what scripture or whatever. That's a God man. That man is going straight to God when he dies. That man knows exactly what the fuck he's doing. And it's so authentic. And like,
Why wouldn't God want to hang out with them?
why?
He would
Yeah.
immediately want to hang out with them.
and that's what the Bhagavad Gita is explaining is like, there's a verse in here I think I can find where God is through Krishna explaining his favorite kind of people. And it's basically people that don't overthink anything or expect anything, that are just sincere and take life one step at a time and do what they're supposed to do.
In D&D terms, which I often think about it in, it's a very chaotic good thing.
Yeah.
Like being good, but also not caring about what anyone else expects, not caring about the order of the world, just
Okay,
doing
but-
what you want to do, doing
But
you.
here's the thing. So in D&D, you have these classifications of people, right?
Mhm.
In the Vedic thought, you also have classifications of people, but people are made up of 3 metaphysical substrates called gunas.
Okay.
And each of them is like an archetype that carries certain qualities, and everybody is fundamentally constituted of a certain ratio of those 3 gunas, or those 3 like fundamental archetypes.
Okay.
And
So
one of
everyone
them
has a unique ratio, a unique mix.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of them is like explicitly bad. Like one of them is like, people who are heavy in this sin, kill, eat putrid food, fat, lazy, and evil. And it's like, why? Why is that one of God's 3 flavors? What are you talking about? And then the
'Cause a lot of
second
that's
one,
funny.
I,
A lot of that could be funny.
I guess, dude. I don't know what exactly his goal is, but the Bhagavad Gita basically implies that if you were made to be evil and you go about and do your evil acts, then you did your job. Like it kind of implies that.
Wow.
Because it explains that some people are primarily, fundamentally constituted of the bad of the three gunas. And it says to do your own duty imperfectly is better than to do another duty perfectly. And if you do your duty, you are covered by God. So I think that according to the Bhagavad Gita, there are people who are just here to fuck shit up. And they're supposed to fuck shit up. And if they don't fuck shit up, then God's like, pussy, I made you to fuck shit up. Because Arjuna, like, he's about to go into war, right? And he's going to kill people that he's related to. And Krishna is telling him, what will it look like if you just slink off? Like, everybody's going to remember you as a coward forever. You're going to leave all of your men out there to realize that they just had a leader dip out on them. And he's basically saying, like, everybody's going to think you're a pussy if you don't kill these people. And so, it's so ethically weird.
Yeah.
But if you think about it in the context of long-term evolution, it does make sense, because the way that systems evolve is by cooperating and competing. They're always bumping into each other and then helping each other out, and then bumping into each other and then helping each other out.
Mm-hmm.
A relationship is like that. You help each other out, you serve one another. Like, I serve you, you serve me, and then you bump into each other, and pieces fall off. Parts of you die, parts of you are changed, parts of you have to compromise, and this bumping into one another. I mean, if you look at that like a society of people, a country of people, and another country of people, what happens when they bump into each other? Millions die, but that was murder right there.
Yeah.
I just scraped off skin cells. Like, I just killed skin cells, you know?
Genocides happened.
Yes. No.
Families.
Seriously. Yeah. Trillions. Yeah. Families, universes, like ideas, like there's DNA in there. That's the fundamental code of being. I'm just destroying it. I'm just disrespecting it. Why? Because it's my body. So I can do this. And so God is saying, like, no, Arjuna, this is my body. You're made of my body. They're made of my body. And I'm telling you to go kill them. Don't be a pussy. And so and it also does explain that he transcends evil and good. Like in the introduction by the author Stephen Mitchell.
Arjuna does, or Krishna does?
Krishna does. Arjuna doesn't explain anything in the whole book. He just asks stupid questions. He's just like, wait, you're confusing me. Explain again. And Krishna keeps explaining stuff. But it does explain that God transcends good and evil. And Stephen Mitchell, who did such a great job translating this, it's so beautiful. He pointed out in the introduction that in Isaiah, in the Old Testament, it says, I alone do all these things. I create good with my right hand and evil with my left. And you see that same theology in the Bhagavad Gita. He's like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Evil and good, it's all created by me. I transcend it. And the whole thing is my project and my dance, and you can't understand because you're relative. Like when Job asked God, like, dude, how can you do all these terrible things to me? I didn't do anything wrong. And God's like, you don't know who the fuck you're talking to, and he pretty much tells him to shut up. Like, he tells him, like, you weren't there when the universes were colliding and being created and monsters were faced. Like, you have no idea. And so obviously that can be manipulated for bad. But at the same time, like, I feel like a lot of people will read things like that in the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita, and they'll be like, that is too dangerous and too problematic to entertain. We need to just put that away. It's like, but do you think that you as a person who lives 70 years in a 13 billion year old universe is going to just easily grasp the nature of God without questioning any of your fundamental beliefs or learning anything new or being corrected or being disgusted and terrified? Do you think God is just going to make perfect sense to you? And if you do, then do you think you have anything to learn? And if you don't, then don't you think you are God? And if you do, isn't that stupid? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of course it's going to disgust you and freak you out to learn how God really works. But it seems like evil is sanctioned by God.
Yeah, I think it seems that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like a common. That feels like something I've heard enough places that I take it pretty seriously, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Like our friend who was connected with voodoo.
Sure.
And he knew that the voodoo priests, before they cursed people, would have to pray to God and ask permission. Can we curse this person?
Yeah.
And God might respond and be like, nope, they're off limits. Don't fuck with them.
And did he say
Or-
that was the case? That sometimes, according to the voodoo queen, that God would sometimes say, no, you can't do that?
Well, no. First of all, he mentioned voodoo. He called them voodoo gods sometimes and voodoo priests sometimes if they were male.
Okay.
Not the voodoo queens. And no, I'm just making the assumption that God sometimes says no because otherwise why would they have to ask?
Maybe you just have to ask. Maybe you just have to.
Maybe.
Maybe that's how it works. I don't
Maybe. Yeah, that is an assumption on my part. I don't know if that's how they do it or not.
know. Ask and you shall receive. Maybe it's like that. Yeah.
Right. Like you have to ask, but yeah, at the end of the day, you can do whatever. I sent you down there to be the cancer cell. But then, I mean, it's when I pray to God, I often call him a sick fuck, and I honestly mean it in a way where I'm saying I'm like God, you sick fuck, what is happening in this world? And I'm not saying it to degrade him because I understand that I don't have any place to question God, but I'm saying it like I'm pointing out to God, like, do you have any idea how confused I am about how all of this works and how bad this looks?
Yeah. Do you see how weird this is from my perspective?
Right. And I don't know if he does. I don't know if he does. I assume he does, but it's like, dude, do you remember?
If he doesn't, he will.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
when he gets here.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
when you get there, I meant, is actually what I was thinking. Like,
But
yeah, whatever.
But he is supposedly every perspective at the same time.
Yeah,
so,
he probably
you know,
knows. Yeah.
He probably knows, but seriously, like, I'm really looking forward to Peterson's book, Couldn't Miss an Episode, We Who Wrestle with God, because I feel like he's going to touch on some of this stuff, like how psychologically taxing it really is to take the scriptures, I'm referring to all the scriptures, like I'm not like a Bible's the book type of guy. I genuinely think that we all, as modern people, need to dig into all of these key scriptures, the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching and the Bible, and take them seriously. And it's very psychologically taxing to do that because you get to ideas that feel like they contradict. And it's like God is the unity of all opposites. And so to grasp God, you have to take this idea way over here and this idea way the fuck over here and try to figure out how there could possibly be a perspective in which both of them fit. You know?
Yeah.
Just like if there was an ant right here and I went boom, and then I went boom over here, it could never comprehend that came from the same thing. They came
Sure.
from opposite directions. Something
Yeah.
happened way over there, something happened way over there. There's no way those are connected. It's like, ha 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 ha. You don't know, I'm a person. I can bang over here and bang over here. And that's the presence of God to us. It's so far off that we're like, wait, so you dislike evil so much that you want us to kill people who are evil in certain contexts? If it's like I don't see God like telling people like, hey, you, Evan, kill Raleigh. He's a bad guy. It's always state versus state. It's always group versus group, it seems, when God like sanctions killing. As far as I know, I could be wrong, but
A lot of people that kill people say that someone told them to do it.
oh yeah, I know. I just mean when God sanctions people to kill according to the scriptures, like according to the Hindu and Jewish and Christian
Oh, I
and
get
Buddhist
you.
scriptures. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think God tells anybody to kill anybody in the Christian or Buddhist scriptures. Seems like just the old ones. Maybe he's getting nicer over time, but it's like you try to take this idea way over here. You dislike evil so much that you want us to kill to get rid of it, and then over here, oh, you made it in the first place as a bit. Like, how am I supposed to hold this over here and hold this over here at the same time? I can't reach. Expand me, Lord, so I can reach. Like, that's what wrestling with God is supposed to be. I know this is true, and I know this is true, and I know I can't unite those ideas in my head. Please expand me and mature me so that I can. And then he's going to respond by putting me through a bunch of suffering so I can mature through it. And that's a whole nother thing, you know?
Yeah.
It's like these ideas, Israel wouldn't, the Holy Land Israel wouldn't mean those who wrestle with God if it wasn't an unbelievable fight to grasp these concepts, you know? And so I think it's exactly right that these concepts are so terrifying and disgusting and strange and confusing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't sound like biting the fruit was ever like a good idea. It was, or at least not a comfortable idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad we're out here confused.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to jump through a couple random tidbits.
Cool.
This is pretty interesting. Krishna said to Arjuna, "Many times I have been born, and many times you have also." Oh, actually, let me start like one page earlier. So Krishna was explaining to Arjuna that he created a Hindu god that was like trillions of years old or something. Somehow older than a repetition of the universe. I don't know how any of this works. But he was explaining, like, I created this god from billions and trillions of years ago. And Arjuna is like, how? You're right here. What are you talking about? And it was kind of like a moment where Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. And they're like, how? What are you talking about? He's like, I am something here in human form. You know, he's trying to explain it. So Arjuna asked him, but you were born countless eons later than the god of the sun. How then is it possible that you taught this doctrine to him? Oh, it wasn't that he created him. It was, I taught this to whatever god way back in the day. So anyway, Krishna responds, many times I have been born, and many times you have also. All these lives I remember. You recall only this one. That's pretty hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mark of spiritual formation to, like, and this is part of the reason I'm studying hypnotherapy, because it's the most reliable way to access past lives. And I think that just like through psychotherapy, you want to get someone to a point where they are the whole person of their lifespan, because that makes them more formidable. We are also more formidable if we are that which has lived multiple lives. Like, a lot of people are so detached from their past that they don't understand, like, you're the guy who did that a year ago. You're the guy who did that 10 years ago. You're the guy who was that kid. That's all you. Those people who understand that they are their whole life are more whole people, and they're harder to throw off because they're grounded in something that's deeper. They're not like dissociated from their whole lives and just clueless about their whole narrative. Peterson says those people have no narrative continuity. You have no narrative continuity. If you have narrative continuity, then you have a stronger foundation. So it's like you could be to the point where you have a strong narrative continuity of your whole life. But then you could get to the point where you have a strong narrative continuity across multiple incarnations.
Yeah.
Like, no, I know exactly who I am. And then the implications of that are so interesting. Like, are you qualified for a job if you thoroughly remember doing it in a past life? Is like, could that count as a qualification if you could demonstrate it? And that just opens up a whole.
Good enough for me.
Yeah. Well, perfect.
Yeah.
Hire whoever you want then.
Yeah.
So, and then I think the ultimate, like, I think the logical conclusion of that is, how formidable are you if you identify as being itself? And actually, that's spoken incorrectly too, because Krishna specifies a few times in the Bhagavad Gita that he transcends the duality of being and non-being, which obviously doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense.
You try to look there, it just shorts out your brain real quick.
Right, you can't look. But he says, to grasp that, you have to see that action is really inaction, and see that inaction is really action. Because action is really inaction, because since everything is already done in the absolute perspective, it only appears that it's happening on this finite linear timeline from our relative perspective. Everything that you're doing is really just something that has already happened and always is happening. You know,
Mhm.
all your relative behaviors are really just a fragment in the eternal now. But inaction is action because life, relatively speaking, is constantly in motion. And so you think, oh, I didn't do anything today. It's like, oh no, you did a lot today. You regenerated millions of cells today. Your heart beat thousands of times today. Like, you did a lot today. I don't know if that's what it means by seeing action and inaction and inaction and action, but that's the closest I can get conceptually.
Yeah. The other thing I could think of that it might mean would be like that maybe for every action you take, you leave infinite actions untaken at that moment.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah,
It might be like
because
that.
you have unlimited choices. So it's like, yeah, you did one thing, but you didn't do 99,000 million trillion things.
Right. And if you
Right.
did nothing, that is doing something. Like everything is doing something.
Mhm.
And you are constantly turning down infinite options for one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe.
So whatever he is transcends being and non-being. You know what's really
a trip.
what's
Yeah.
really unfortunate is there was a verse I wanted to point out to you and I never saw it today. There was like a couple chapters that I just skimmed real quick.
Mhm.
So I don't know how I missed it, but many people in the Vedic Buddhist Hindu train of thought think of God as like a neutral, impersonal, detached force. They don't think of God as having a specific personality, you know, or specific traits or anything. It's just like kind of a nothingness, kind of an indescribable, you know, like the Tao way of viewing the divine.
Right. Because any sort of any personality that you put on God feels like it limits God.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why that's hard because
Right.
that implies a limitation. If
Right.
he's funny, then there's no serious God.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
Then
Yeah.
then he has a trait, and
Yeah.
traits are relative and finite.
Yeah,
And he's supposed to be absolute and infinite.
which implies that there's a trait he doesn't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's everything. So how could he not have any given trait?
Right.
And so, but in like the Mesopotamian, Jewish, Christian, modern way of thinking, or not modern, but not modern, not Western, just like the more Judeo-Christian way of thinking, God is something not to explore by meditating on the indescribable, but something to have a personal relationship with, as though it sees you and likes you.
Yeah.
You know, and you see it and like it. And Arjuna asks Krishna, are you better conceptualized as the indescribable emptiness, or are you better conceptualized as something I can have a relationship with? And Krishna basically says they're both fine, but it is much easier to contact me by conceptualizing me as something you have a personal relationship with than some indescribable nothingness that you contemplate. And that just blew me away. I mean, I had to just sit back and go like, damn, that is so crazy.
Say it one more time. So he said it's better what?
It's better to, you can more easily contact God by conceptualizing God as something you have a personal relationship with,
Okay.
rather than some indescribable nothingness that you contemplate or meditate on.
Mm-hmm.
And that just sounds like, I mean, it's just the opposite of what I expected to read in an Eastern scripture, in a Vedic Hindu scripture. I thought that the Taoist, Confucian, Buddhist, Hindu, and Vedic way of thinking of the absolute was totally impersonal. And here's one of the most influential scriptures of India, and it's saying, no, it's something you have a personal relationship with. That's a better way to go about it. Like, I never expected that.
I wonder if it could work in such a way that to you, in your world, from your perspective, God has a certain personality and you have a certain relationship with God from
Right.
your perspective. But from my perspective, he has a different personality. And like just from everybody's perspective, he has, or it, or whatever you choose to, however you choose to gender it.
This book does describe God as transcending male and female.
Okay. But then maybe anybody can just assign based on their own personality what the personality of God is, because maybe there's like a complementary personality to every person, Maybe
Mhm.
God is like a personality that you need to contend with in this world. And so
Mhm.
the universe as it is for you in this incarnation is a personality that you contend with, and it's unique, and you wouldn't get that perspective from any other way.
Mhm.
You wouldn't get that perspective from any other incarnation, is what I mean to say.
Right. I agree with that. I never thought of that. And I would add a couple things that the ultimate goal is still to achieve unity with God. But I think that what you're saying is true, and that it's a faster path to getting to that unity with God, to essentially see the aspect of God that reflects you on God, having a personal relationship with that, and that getting you in the door to reunite with God, rather than trying to unite with something that you can't relate to. Like, because like you could refer to those as the yoga of relationship and the yoga of contemplation.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could say the yoga of relationship is a faster path of yoga, because seeing yourself reflected in God, seeing that which you have in common with God, or that which connects you to God, or those traits in God that call to you, will deliver you to Him faster.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you achieve unity with Him, you'll realize that He's just as relatable to anyone else as you, and you'll shed that relative perspective. Because from our relative perspectives right now, we love this side of God and we hate all these other sides of God. We don't relate to Him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we relate to God so closely that we then come into unity with Him, and then once we achieve that perspective, that unified perspective with God, we can then see that really God can relate to everyone just as well as He related to us when we were distanced from Him. That's how I'm thinking it would work. And then the path of contemplation is like, since you don't have anything relatable to grab onto, it just takes longer for it to sink in. Because that's what he didn't say it was bad.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, I'm both. Oh, I'm personal and impersonal. But seeing me as something personal you have a relationship with will get you here quicker.
Yeah.
Easier way to do it."
Yeah, it makes sense to me that there would be different paths that take different amounts of time, depending
Mhm.
on how you want to view it.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose whichever way you view God is exactly the way you were meant to view God, whether you view it as very impersonal and a sort of shadowy figure that you can't ever really know.
Right.
He's just wings and black holes and light and suns
Right.
and just all folding in on itself.
But even that's personal. Those are all personal traits, you know? Like the impersonal.
I suppose I'm saying things.
The impersonal way
describing.
is like Maharishi's yoga is. I'm referring to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who founded the MIU. Is use so the meditation technique that he advocates. He doesn't advocate any form of prayer, as far as I know. The meditation technique that he advocates is transcendental meditation, and the purpose of it is you repeat a mantra in your head until you basically, like, there's a mantra in your head and you're repeating this mantra. It's a Sanskrit phrase. It doesn't mean anything to you, but you're repeating this sound, and this sound is nice and catchy and kind of alluring, and it just naturally draws your attention towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And just like if you listen to a song over and over again, you'll start to pick up on the song more and more subtly with more nuance. You start to experience the mantra as you repeat it in your head with more and more subtlety and nuance, until you get to the finest relative level of the sound that's repeating in your head, and you then experience like you get down to the finest level, and then you get to the level of the mantra that is just a unified field. It's like, just like if you zoomed into this table far enough, it would just be a unified field that you would, and then you wouldn't be observing anything anymore. You and the table would be the same thing. It's like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what it feels like when it happens is, it feels like the mantra is getting closer. It feels like the mantra, which you are generating in your head, and it's coming out of you, it feels like it's there in your head. And in your internal experience, you feel like that which is generating the mantra is somehow separate from the mantra. And then you realize, oh, this mantra isn't repeatedly popping up in my head. I'm generating it. And then you realize, oh, the generator, the generated, and the generation are all one continuous process. and then you naturally stop repeating the mantra, and you experience a silence that is so fucking cool. It makes you feel like you took a perfect 4-hour nap on a Sunday afternoon if you experience it for a moment. It's really, really profound. I know that I hit it because my body needs to stretch afterwards. My body feels so light. I just want to stretch. Like I woke up from a nap. My eyes are watering. My head feels this clear lightness. It's really something else. And what Maharishi is saying is that is the experience of pure consciousness, because in the pure state of consciousness, there's not a separation between the experienced, the experiencer, and experience itself. There's not a separation between the projector, the projection, and the projected. It is all the project. It's all one thing. And so consciousness at its finest relative scale is threefold. You have the experiencer, experience, and the experienced. So there's three. But as you get to the finer relative levels of the mantra, those three are like getting closer to each other. And then at the moment like that you experience pure consciousness, they merge. And in those moments you have no thoughts, no feelings, no sense of body, no sense of time. When you come out of it, you have no idea how much time went by. Sadhguru tells a story that he went into meditation and he accidentally came out 13 days later. And I heard about stuff like that happening at a Christian there's like a Christian spiritual program that people go to where they learn like spiritual gifts and stuff. Can't remember what it's called. It's some hippie church in California.
Okay.
And people will just go into praying in the spirit.
Bohemian Grove.
They wake up with a record deal. That people will pray in the spirit, which is praying in the presence of God for nothing but the presence of God, trying to merge with God in your inner experience, and they'll be in there for days, just sitting there for days.
Wow.
No problem. They're suspended in that moment that I'm talking about. And that pure consciousness, that is the impersonal aspect of God. There are no traits. Because traits, you get it.
Yeah.
That's an impersonal God, Not black holes and shit, because those are things.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's the thing.
But Krishna is saying, no, don't meditate on the... I mean, I think TM is such a concise way of doing it, and I almost hate to say that because the Transcendental Meditation movement is so gimmicky, and they promote things sometimes in such a tacky way, like how Maharishi would go to India and he'd be like, this is a practice where we repeat mantras that, and I'm not going to, part of the deal with Transcendental Meditation is you're not supposed to know how it works, and you're not supposed to talk about how it works, and you're not supposed to talk about what the mantras are, and you're not supposed to talk about what the mantras mean, and you're not supposed to think about what they are or what they mean, and that's part of how it works. And so I respect that by not going into it, but I'm just going to say this. When Maharishi taught it in India, he was very specific about the meanings of the mantras and how they related to the literatures because those people were familiar with those concepts and comfortable with them. But when he goes to the U.S. and teaches TM, he says, this is purely scientific, it has nothing to do with religion at all. But it does. But the religious themes aren't Christian and they're not American friendly. So he just says, oh, it's just science. And then he goes over to India and he goes, oh, this is religion. So, I mean, it's so gimmicky that I hate to praise it. Mm-hmm. But it fucking works so good. I mean, I've tried like the breaths and, different kinds of meditations. Like, nothing works like repeating this little mantra. And when I do other mantras, I have profound experiences, but not that pure silent dynamism experience. Not what John Hagelin says, that what you experience at the peak of transcendental meditation is the unified field. You are the unified field in that moment. No time, no body, no content, no space. You just are. Yeah. You just are in that moment. And it happens for a brief moment. So you got a 20-minute TM session, you got an in-stroke, and then a moment of transcendence, and then an outstroke for the rest. You go in for like 8 to 12 minutes, go out for like 8 to 12 minutes on the way out. And here's evidence that this experience is actually what they're saying it is. at that moment, when people report having the transcendental experience, if they do it hooked up to EEGs, then there is a trait observed at the moment that they claim transcendence called alpha 1 coherence. So that means that many areas of the brain are firing at, I believe it's 8 to 10 hertz, all at the same time. Coherence is observed in other meditation practices, but not alpha 1 coherence. So I think like Buddhist meditation, you'll get, I think it was, I don't want to guess. Why guess? You get coherence, but it's a different frequency. So it'll be like you get gamma coherence, and it's 4 to 5 hertz. So you get coherence, all the brain. You have a certain kind of coherence on LSD as well, where all the areas of the brain are suddenly firing at the same wavelength. And so all of your thoughts are more interconnected, and you have an experience of wholeness. That happens on LSD, and the EEGs show coherence. That happens in Buddhist meditation, and the EEGs show coherence. But alpha 1 coherence only occurs with TM. Now, here's why that's significant. Alpha 1 coherence also occurs at the moment that you fall asleep, at the moment that you wake up, and at the moment between REM and non-REM sleep. And so that's significant because according to Maharishi's model of consciousness, you have 7 states of consciousness, and I can't go into the top 3, or I guess the top 2. But the first 4 are waking, sleeping, dreaming, and the 4th is transcendental. So you have sleeping, dreaming, and waking. So sleeping is obviously just sleeping but without dreams. Dream, obviously sleeping with dreams, and waking. Those are pretty straightforward. Transcendental consciousness is the 4th state. So transcendental consciousness, we're getting way off track, but it still, this is a Vedic text, and I'm talking about Vedic stuff, so it's still whatever. So transcendental consciousness in the model of Maharishi is I'll explain it this way. So you have 2 concepts, concept of self and concept of content, right? So in dreaming, you have concept of content, but you don't have concept of self. You're experiencing things, but you don't have a concept of yourself. The experience just unfolds around you spontaneously.
And by that, I mean because like you're not aware that you're asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. In sleeping, you have no concept of self and no concept of content. There's no self and there's no content. There's just nothing, right?
Okay.
Then in waking, you have concept of self and you have concept of content. You know that you're here and you know that shit's happening here.
Yes.
In transcendental consciousness, the 4th state of consciousness, you have concept of self, but no concept of content. So that's the capital S self that Carl Jung and the Bhagavad Gita talk about.
Okay.
The unchanging, unwavering self at the center of all the other shit going on around it.
Mm-hmm.
So that self is God, frankly, the thing that's not touched by anything that changes in the universe, right? So transcendental consciousness is, to use a chemistry term, I'm going to use this term wrong. Fuck it. The transition phase between the other states of consciousness. So for the sleeping state of consciousness to transform into the dreaming state of consciousness, according to Maharishi's model, it has to go through transcendental consciousness. And so that's Maharishi's explanation of why people have incredible insights and experiences right between falling asleep. They have these divine insights right between these states. So
I think we've talked about this on the podcast many times. It comes up a lot. In the hypnagogic state, people call it.
Yes. Thank you. So Maharishi knew all of this shit long before this could be scientifically validated. But Fred Travis, who is a psychology professor who is now the head of brain consciousness and cognition research at MIU, he accidentally discovered that alpha 1 coherence is clearly measured when a person falls asleep. And that instantly corroborated what Maharishi had said. He said transcendental consciousness happens between these other 3 states of consciousness. It's the 4th. It's the transition point between the other 3. And he said, this is the same state that's achieved in transcendental meditation. And you do see alpha 1 coherence between the states of consciousness and in the moment of transcendence in TM. And you have other physiological markers at the point of transcendence in TM. Like all of a sudden, the two branches of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems, they both fire at the same time together. Which is really weird because they usually operate in kind of a give and take. Like, oh, we're calm now, so parasympathetic take over. And, oh, we got some shit to do now, so sympathetic take over. They normally give and take. But when transcendence occurs, they both kick on at the same time. It's weird. And then apneustic breathing occurs.
Sorry, what breathing?
Apneustic. That means that the inhales, the inhales and exhales, they naturally go down to a pace of like 16. That doesn't sound that long now that I'm saying, but try it. It's pretty fucking long. It's like 16 seconds or something. The breathing just like slows down a ton all of a sudden at that moment. So if you follow the autonomic nervous system and the EEG and the breath rate, you can clearly see all these changes happen at the same time. So the fact that these physiological markers occur at the same time shows that something is happening that's causing all of them, and it's transcendence. And then the fifth state of consciousness is cosmic consciousness. So cosmic consciousness means that you have alternated so many times between transcendental consciousness and the relative states, waking, sleeping, and dreaming, that the state of transcendence starts to be carried with you throughout your daily experiences.
Wow. So like if you drill transcending enough, then transcending eventually becomes something that your body becomes very comfortable accessing.
Yeah.
To the point where like you're kind of always a little bit it.
You're always transcend. Yeah.
Wow.
But the world around you isn't yet. That occurs, that starts to occur at the next level of consciousness, at the sixth level. But at the fifth level, at cosmic consciousness, your sense of self is always grounded in that transcendental experience. And people reporting cosmic consciousness, there's two strong pieces of evidence that there's something really going on here. The first is that they demonstrate persistent alpha 1 coherence in the background of their EEGs all the time.
Wow.
While they're moving around.
Really?
Yeah, you can clearly see if you measure the amount of alpha 1 coherence in their brain over time, because they have this EEG machines at MIU, so they have people all the time like, yeah, learn TM, we're going to put you on an EEG every month for the next 5 years. They're measuring people all the time. You can clearly see alpha 1 coherence on the EEGs measurably creep into their daily experiences. And then another thing that they experience is they stop losing consciousness. They stop losing the continuity of awareness when they transition through states. So what that means is that as they're falling asleep, they consciously experience, now I'm going to sleep. Now I'm asleep. And they rest in this little silent darkness, and they sit there asleep, not experiencing anything. They just sit there in this quiet darkness. And then, oh, here's the dreams. And the dreams start to come in, and they start to experience the dreams, and they have their dreams for a while. They're lucid through the whole fucking dreams.
Dang.
And then, oh, that's about over. Oh, more darkness. And then they can just kind of start feeling their consciousness be pulled towards their body, and they ride through the whole thing. Like when the people who worked closely with Maharishi, like the way that he slept is he would just be working, right? He'd be typing and working and shit. And then he would just close his eyes and he would just sleep. And then he would just like start working again, just come back and start working again. It's not like, oh, I woke up, let me get my bearings. It would just,
wow.
On cosmic consciousness, you just keep going through. So then the next levels are God and unity consciousness, God consciousness and unity consciousness. So God consciousness occurs when with yourself established in the transcendent, you continue to practice meditation, and probably if you're that serious at this point, you're also eating the right diet and you're doing the yoga and the breathing and everything too. Then you start to transcend, you start to experience finer and finer scales of the world around you, in the same sense that in TM, you start to experience finer scales of the mantra. So you start to see into reality at a deeper level around you. Your senses become more nuanced. And eventually, what you perceive around you is a an omnipresent divine light. And then when you graduate through that experience, you get to unity consciousness, where you perceive everything as that transcendental field as well as yourself, and you don't even perceive fundamentally a distinction between you and other. And cosmic consciousness is still like, you're you and I'm me, but I know I'm the absolute, but I don't see you as the absolute. In God consciousness, you see everything as the finest relative scale, and then in unity consciousness, you see everything as you, and everything as that unified thing. So,
And are there people that are at that level of consciousness now?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. And a criticism of this model is that early on they were saying that a state of consciousness is defined, like you can't define a certain mode of being as a state of consciousness unless it has measurable physiological markers. And so when they got to the fourth state of consciousness and they did explain the measurable physiological markers of transcendental consciousness, and also like the qualitative description, of, look, it happens between the states, here's evidence. I'm like, damn, that's fucking incredible. I'm on board. And then cosmic consciousness with the descriptions of people staying conscious throughout the state, with alpha 1 coherence being measured throughout the day, with all of the other health benefits going along with it. I'm like, fucking A, okay, let's go. Mm-hmm. And then when they got to God consciousness and unity consciousness, they totally dropped the subject of physiological measurable markers and relied only on qualitative descriptions. It's like, okay, I'm going to suspend belief in that. I'm not just going to give out my belief to that. Like, you gotta get through the security guard of my rational mind. I need something here. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So,
if somebody wanted to not just take your word for it and wanted to like learn more about that, is there anywhere that they could see that sort of research that you're talking about, the like alpha 1 coherent stuff that's going on with both with people like on people that are transcendental meditating and also people that are like always that are at cosmic consciousness?
So I do know that like the TM organizations put out that research. There's a TM website that's probably tmfoundation.org.
Okay.
But they publish so much research because they put this stuff on blast all the time that if you look up like TM studies, and for those who don't know, if you type in scholar.google.com and then search, you'll only find peer-reviewed articles. So you could go Scholar Google and just look up TM research, Transcendental Meditation research.
Okay.
You'll also find that the Army has investigated Transcendental Meditation, which is pretty interesting.
You end up finding that a lot with like all sorts of psychic things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
The government's got their...
Like the Edgar Cayce Foundation, the CIA contracted remote viewers to explore Edgar Cayce's library. It's like, it's a public library. Why didn't you just go in and look around? But that's documented, that the CIA had remote viewers spy on the Edgar Cayce library.
Well, they may have wanted to view it not now. They may have wanted to view it in the past.
That's true.
As it was.
The on-paper justification was there was Edgar Cayce camps, and there was counselors at these camps molesting kids. And so the CIA was like, hey, we draw the line at abusing children. We need to look into this. And
CIA is not cool with that.
Dude, one more random joke, and then we need to get out of here because we've been off subject forever. Nobody's going to watch this. So
I disagree.
Okay, awesome.
This is great. Yeah.
Awesome, yeah. Oh, it is. But I've been steeped in this consciousness stuff so much that I'm fucking sick of it. And so I talk about it, and it's really interesting, and I'm like, yeah, and then transcendental, and there's evidence, and you're like, damn, that's real scientific evidence. That's really interesting. And I'm like so bored because the school is really dogmatic, and I have learned everything that I just told you 6 fucking times in different classes. It's like, why am I paying for all of these different classes? Give me the degree. So, but I agree, it is actually pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But just a funny joke, Tim Dillon did an episode called Live from Ukraine, and he's joking around about the Ukraine-Russia thing. Have you listened to that yet?
Yes.
Okay, and so the comedian, Evan, have you listened to it yet? You have?
Yeah.
Damn it. I don't get to fucking share something funny. But when the comedian...
Vladislav.
Yeah, when Vladislav, the comedian from Ukraine, is on, And he says, like, well, the president of Ukraine hasn't diddled any kids. And Tim says, that's probably why you're getting invaded.
That
I
was a
was
great
like,
one.
holy shit,
Yeah,
dude.
he liked that one too.
Oh, my God. That was so funny.
Did you happen to bookmark the part in the book that I've referenced before about how there's only one God? And like how you're supposed to know which God's the right God because everybody's got a different God.
Sure. I think so.
Also, I wanted to say about when you were talking about transcendental meditation and the mantra and the way that that kind of breaks down and the relationship between the mantra and the person saying it and the saying of it and the hearing of it,
Mm-hmm.
the way those end up like sort of folding together.
Mm-hmm.
Had you thought at all about how that sort of connects with the Trinity? Because like you were talking about
Well, yeah.
the person saying the
Yeah.
mantra, the person hearing the mantra, and then the
Yeah.
saying of the mantra itself, and then those sort of combine, and it's in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking of the Trinity thing. I wanted to point out that sort of.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have. Because C.S. Lewis, in arguing for the rationale of God being singular and trifold, pointed out the projector example that I use a lot. And that example is so close to how Maharishi explains the threefold nature of consciousness. But it's just something that Maharishi applies to different things. Like his philosophy of education is that there's not enough emphasis on the state of the learner. All the emphasis is on the content. Like, how can we make this content better? He's like, there's no emphasis on the state of consciousness of the learner. Like, and the David Lynch
Yeah.
Foundation is teaching TM to thousands of low-income kids in public schools, which is going to have an extremely positive impact on them and is an extremely bad idea because it's explicitly religious. Like, to get trained in TM, you have to go through a religious initiation. Like, you have to bring fruit and offer it. You have to bring a handkerchief. You have to repeat a mantra. You have to look at a picture of a guru. There's candles. There's incense.
Are we gonna have to cut all this?
Fuck no.
Okay.
Fuck them, dude.
All right.
Fuck them. I'm not going to explain anything about the mantras because I will just let them have their thing. And if anybody wants to know what the mantras are, they can look into that for themselves. But I think I'm allowed to talk about the process of learning TM.
Okay.
And if I am, fuck them. It's so ridiculous. But fuck, what was I going to say? Yeah, there's incense, dude. There's candles. Part of the reason that you have to pay to do the training is just so that there is an exchange because that you need to sacrifice something. Like, as an incoming MIU student, I got a full rebate for the cost of TM training, like 3 months after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
I had to pay money just for the principle of it. Like, it works better if you pay for it because then there's an exchange set up between you and the lineage holders that are passing this down to you.
Yeah.
And
I can see that argument.
and like some of the mechanics of the technique is like part of the mechanics is that this whole lineage of people is like a long bead connecting you back to God. And so being inducted into this tradition where Maharishi, because I learned it from Philip Land. Philip Land learned it from Maharishi in the 70s. Maharishi got his teachings from Jay Guru Dev. And then you can go back and there's and so I'm in, like I explained, Vedic tradition. The Vedic tradition of knowledge is the longest unbroken chain of knowledge in recorded history. I'm in that unbroken chain because I'm initiated as a student of Maharishi, and he's a student of Jay Guru Dev, and he's initiated, blah, 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 blah. You can go all the way back.
Right.
And that's kind of cool, but it also sets up people to think that they have to go through the route of this lineage to get back to God. And it's like, I am God. God's right here. This table's God. What are we talking about? I have to go through this chain of thousands of years of blah, blah, blah. But despite how much it irritates my modern mind, that whole process of it, it's still, I mean, it works so good. I'll never stop doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never stop doing TM. I'll never stop repeating the mantra that I think is bullshit. because even though I think it's bullshit, it still works. So it's like, it doesn't work because I believe in it. So I started studying hypnotherapy, and I'm like, oh, I get it. They're using the rituals to set up suggestibility and convince you that it'll work, and it makes it work. That's what they're doing. So I decided the mantra doesn't fucking work. It's bullshit. Watch. Oh, God, I transcended again. Damn it. It still works. I don't know how it works. But there was a part in here that I think addresses your question a little bit, where Krishna explains that anybody worshiping anything is ultimately worshiping him. And he allows anybody to worship whatever they want because he understands that ultimately what they are worshiping is him anyway.
Right.
And he basically accepts all sacrifices offered to all gods, even though he knows that it would be better if they offered it directly to him.
Yeah, that's basically what I remember.
But I think I can find it for you real quick.
I think it might have been titled something like A Letter from God. If there's chapters, I think it was something like Letter from God. But based on the structure of the book, it's all kind of talking to God.
Divine Manifestations? No, that was the one where he's like, I'm this of this and this of this. Yeah, I'm not sure where it is, unfortunately.
Okay, no biggie.
Yeah. And also, just a quick note, the great Gandhi interpreted this whole thing as symbolic. And even though he called the Bhagavad Gita his eternal mother, he advocated total nonviolence. So he didn't buy the shit about like, hey, it's all life, it's all God, killing is okay in certain contexts, if it's a group versus a group, if it's better for everyone in the long run, da-da-da. He didn't buy none of that shit. He's like, no, this is a symbolic story. The whole war thing is just set up to explain its symbolism. No violence, nobody kill anybody. So just to throw his opinion in there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have anything else? Cool.
Night school.
Night school.